This all started as a bit of a joke, putting this picture up. But then I thought, actually, it's quite a good theme to think about surfing the wave of uncertainty and what that means in terms of staff well-being, resilience, and innovation. So I've sort of built the theme from that. And what I want to argue this morning is, I think we're hearing a huge amount about student well-being at the moment, but not so much about staff well-being. And for me, staff are feeling, higher education, the whole context of higher education is a very uncertain world at the moment. The pace of change is rapid and multiple, and we are facing all sorts of challenges. But I would also argue that we're facing all sorts of opportunities. I think we are very much at a crossroads in terms of higher education, and I think the academic library, as part of that context, is very much at a crossroads. And so what I want to argue is that these uncertain times provide real opportunities for academic libraries and academic librarians to innovate in order to address some of these challenges, and that actually that change and that innovation is good for well-being. So that's the tenet of my argument, and you can disagree with me, but I'll just say a bit more before I allow you to. So I'm sure you're well versed with the challenges that we're facing, but I think in order to provide an appropriate context, I just want to just talk through some of them. There's no escaping the fact that marketisation is having a huge impact on us, and that there is competition between different providers, both nationally and internationally, and that the global agenda is also having a significant impact on how we deliver education across the sector. And I think coupled with that is the change in student expectations. Students are variously called customers, consumers, students, a whole range of different things, but that consumerist culture is very relevant to how the culture of higher education has changed, and that the expectations have changed, and that we need to respond to that within this context of competition and marketisation. There are also other stakeholders' expectations in terms of employers, professionals, local communities, corporate social responsibility, and not least within the research agenda and the external stakeholders around research that impact on how we deliver the product. There is also a whole issue around sustainability. Part of that is related to funding arrangements, but there's also a sustainable agenda around future-ready graduates, plus the sort of wider context of sustainability and green context. Funding I've mentioned. I don't think I need to say a lot more about that. We all know what's happening with funding and how that is impacting on the sector. And in many ways, I think we're being asked to do more and more and more with less and less and less. I also have to remember I'm being recorded. Throw something at me if I go off on the soapbox. So it's what? It's the chief executive I'm worried about when I'm talking about finance. We also can't escape the fourth industrial revolution, which I say is having a more far-reaching impact than any other industrial revolution that we've had. So the whole digital context is fundamentally changing the way that society works, and higher education is clearly affected by that, and academic libraries are clearly affected by that. The whole information literacy context is very much shaped by digital environment that we live in, and that's where there are huge opportunities for innovation, which I'll come back to. And then the final thing is about space, and what does space mean in terms of pedagogy, in terms of consumer expectations, and in terms of well-being. Was it Alan just talking about your staff rooms? Those spaces are important. We spend a lot of time at work. Students spend a lot of time in libraries, or some of them do. My son doesn't, but I'm just grateful that he's found it. But we spend time in spaces. We need those spaces to actually be fit for purpose, preferably with natural light and ambient environments. But also increasingly we need to look at different spaces and what that means in terms of different pedagogies, what that means in terms of diverse groups of learners. We have increasing numbers of learners with social anxiety problems. What does that mean in terms of safe spaces and how we provide those services? So there's a huge context, and a lot of that is occupying people's minds in terms of how does this change what we do and how can we engage with that. And I think, as I say, the pace of change is so enormous that there are times when you just say, I just want to step off this roundabout. I just want to step off and take some solace. Or we retreat into the comfort zone and the tradition and the ritual because that's safe. But as I say, I think there are opportunities within this to innovate, and that is actually good for well-being. The other thing that I've put around the circle is the quality assurance and governance agenda, so the metrics, and when we can't escape the numbers and the metrics, and student engagement, and the whole performativity agenda, which I shall come on to. So for me, there are a number of key priority areas that we can address, and academic librarians and libraries are well placed to address this agenda. So there's student engagement and how we engage diverse groups of learners, active and interactive learning, and increasingly inclusive learning, so the UDL principles, universal design of learning, the whole agenda around accessibility and inclusivity. Teaching excellence and research excellence, and we can't escape the impact of those on what we do and how we contribute to wider institutional processes around those. And then I think there are a number of things that actually at this lower level is where we can impact: digital literacy and capability, spaces, skills and support. And that's true whether it's a research or a teaching and learning agenda, and undergraduate and postgraduates. So what does this mean in terms of well-being? It's a lovely picture, isn't it? It's a bit Teletubbies, really. What is well-being? What do we mean when we talk about well-being? I've picked out 3 models, and I'm going to do them out of order, because this is the World Health Organization model of workplace well-being. Sorry, it's a little bit small, but I'll talk through it. So the physical work environment is important. We need to feel that we have a space. That is increasing a challenge. Anybody hot desking? It's not comfortable. You know, people like to have their space that is theirs, and you know, we've recently, we'll say it, recently changed car parking. It's created an enormous amount of stress for staff. Middlesbrough is a sort of area where lots of people don't live here, but they come in to work here. So people are getting in at 7:30 in the morning to get their car parking space. That sort of space, that personal space, that ability to feel that you can do what you want to do is really important for well-being. It causes huge stress not knowing whether you can actually find somewhere where you are going to do what you need to do. We also have personal health resources. And as I say, for me, the uncertain world that we live in can actually impact when we feel that the plates are spinning out of control. Well, maybe it's just me, but there are times in my life I think I can't cope with this. and drawing on those personal health resources in order to cope with those constant challenges. Enterprise and community involvement. This is about adding value, and adding value is about mental well-being. It's about resilience and well-being. Why do we go to work in the first place? Well, it is for the money. But there's many other reasons why people go to work, and it is about wanting to make a difference. It's about wanting to have some value. It's wanting to be valued by other people. It's about wanting to be part of a team. It's about having some sort of structure within your day. So work actually is really important in terms of our own enterprise, psychosocial work environment, and the relationships at work are really important. For me, the Perman Model actually says that slightly better. The World Health Organization model of well-being is very broad. Perman Model is mental well-being, or well-being is where you have positive emotions, you feel good. And feeling good, I think, is about thinking, I've done a good day's work today. I've made a difference. I've impacted in some way. Engagement, finding the flow, engaging with other people, engaging with the task. Authentic connections or relationships with others. That might be staff, it might be students, it's across university networks, etc. Having a purposeful existence, so having a meaning to what you're doing is really important for well-being. And that, for me, that's partly about ownership, and that's what innovation is about, that ownership. This is mine, this is what I'm doing. I'm not just some other taskmaster telling me what to do. I have a sense of meaning to what I'm doing and a sense of achievement, being able to accomplish something. So I like this model. I think this is really useful way for me to think about what does well-being mean and how can we engage with this in order to promote staff value and well-being. And the other model, which I'm sure you're familiar with, is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So the colours look lovely when you do it on your laptop, and I look on here and I think, oh, that's really rather dark and dingy, isn't it? I do apologise. What Maslow, as a psychologist, argued is that we have levels of need, and we ought to need to satisfy those different levels of need in order to get to the highest. So at the basic level, we have basic physiological needs. Then we have safety and security needs, then belonging needs, then self-esteem, and the ultimate is self-actualization. And again, I would argue that in the workplace, we do have basic physiological needs. They're often addressed. But all of these are important in terms of our holistic well-being. So safety and security is safety and security within your job. And again, in the context of higher education at the moment, there is anxiety about whether jobs are safe, whether jobs in the form that they are at the moment are safe. So I think there are very real issues around safety and security for staff. And again, what I want to argue is that this crossroads that we're at provides opportunities to actually create more safety. It's about doing things differently to future-proof the role. Belonging to a culture, an organisation, an institutional context, a wider context, which then leads to self-esteem and a sense of actualisation or achievement. So I talked in the abstract about the Performativity Agenda, and I think this is one of the things that really is driving universities at the moment and creating both the pace of change but also some of the insecurities. The Performativity Agenda, is this something that you're familiar with? Probably is, just not the term necessarily. The Performativity Agenda really came about in the 1990s through the Blairite government, the modernisation of public services, with a much greater emphasis on auditing public institutions to demonstrate the value that those institutions were providing. So that led to a whole range of targets and quantitative measurement to say, yes, this is this is doing what it should be doing. Higher education sort of came to the party a little bit after health and social care services, where performativity started. But there is no doubt that in the new managerialist approaches of higher education and the new business approach of higher education management, that we live in a performativity culture, that performance is measured and is compared with other institutions. And we can debate till we're long in the tooth. Some of us are already there, but we can debate long and hard about whether performativity culture actually does really measure performance and whether you can compare apples and pears across the sector. But the simple fact is that this is the culture we live in. Whether we like TEF, REF, KEF or not, we are stuck with them. Whether we think that the blunt instruments that TEF, REF, certainly TEF, is based on, is an effective way to measure performance of diverse institutions. Whether we agree with that or not, it's what we're stuck with. So we have to demonstrate the value that we are adding through these quantitative measures. I'm quite happy to nail my colours to the wall, even though I am being recorded. I don't like TEF at all. I think it is a blunt instrument. I don't see how you could measure comparative measures between different institutions with different demographics. I don't see that attainment based on 2 1s and firsts is an equitable measure of attainment. If someone has travelled from getting 10% to getting 40%, when someone else has travelled from 70% to 72%, how do you measure that? So, and no one's yet cracked the value added and the learning journey. So I do think that they are blunt measurements, but nevertheless, that's what we're stuck with, and that's what we have to address. And we have to address that within a market competition. So we all want TEF Gold, because that's the market. And I'm using TEF as an example, but REF and KEF, but similar stories. And the argument is that this performativity agenda raises standards, because the worst providers drop off. Look at American healthcare as an example of how that doesn't happen. But anyway, we'll move on. There will be other changes as well that impact on performativity. In the future, we will see demands for personalised services. Again, that's part of that consumerist market, consumerist approach, which will fundamentally change how we measure personalised journeys. And increasingly, external funded bodies will require demonstration of impact and value for money from academic research. So it's all much more controlled within that performativity context. Am I making any sense? In my head I am. In little world of Anne I am. So what does this all mean? Does it mean that within a performativity culture that we become more risk averse? Because we're going to be measured for what we do. Failure is not an option. And there is an argument that that happens. We mustn't try new things because we know that this works. And the NSS scores, therefore, will be good. Or the module evaluations or the user surveys will be good. So we become increasingly risk averse and retreat into the comfort of this is tried and tested. And for me, I think that is a dangerous position to be in. It stifles innovation and it stifles staff well-being. If we are constantly pursuing the targets, then we are in danger of actually not changing the product. And sometimes when we change things, it's not immediately apparent what the positive impact of that is. So, for example, if students may feel that they particularly like something, that doesn't mean that it's the right thing for them. And sometimes you have to change the expectations if you're innovating to do things in a different way. But if we are pursuing targets, we may be constrained from doing that. But what I would say is that there are two things that really provide opportunities for academic librarians to innovate and to have that sense of achievement through innovation in the workplace. The first one is technology, as I've mentioned, the digital world that we live in. And technology is leading to many ways of disruptive innovation. I do like the sense of disruptive innovation. But as I say, the world has changed. There are massive changes in the way that there's scholarly publication and access. Information literacy has massively changed because of the digital world. How people engage with scholarly materials has dramatically changed. The whole collections and resources has changed. The way that we archive materials has changed. A whole range of things, and not to mention the systems as well, and how we can use the underpinning systems to change the way that we work. And there's already a huge number of examples of how academic libraries have adapted to demonstrate value-added services. Each person in this room will have examples of how disruptive innovation has emerged within the academic library to adapt to this change in the fourth industrial revolution. The other area that's changed is the pedagogical approaches. In higher education, for probably 4,000 years, we've used a traditional model of didactic approach. I always found sort of a slight embarrassment standing here using a didactic approach, criticising a didactic approach, but but we're still basing what we do on the 14th century, before books were widely available, where the sage on the stage would read from a piece of written material and everyone else would scribe. And the lecture seminar programme that many universities still use as a default learning and teaching position still uses that 14th century method of delivering knowledge. I think that's a massive generalisation, and I need to be very careful because things are changing. And I think we are moving much more towards different andragogical approaches in our pedagogies through things like paragogy. This is a tour of the gogies. Paragogy is peer learning, collaborative learning, so learning together. And pedagogy, which is it's more than self-directed learning, it's self-selected learning. Best example of pedagogy is things like MOOCs, where people can do that sort of cafeteria-style learning to pick from the sort of shelf-ready products to create their own learning culture. But I think we're increasingly seeing pedagogical approaches through things like student partnership, co-creation, giving people choices. So I think we are starting to move away from that stage on the stage to the guide on the side. And those pedagogies are changing. And the impact of that is that the academic libraries are changing, but also the work of academic librarians is changing. So if we look at the shape of academic libraries, they are no longer warehouses for books. I know I'm stating the obvious. I get the prize for stating the obvious of the morning. But we're seeing learning spaces that are collaborative, that are diverse and flexible, that are technology rich, learning commons, things like that. So there's a fundamental change in the shape of academic libraries. But I would also say in the position of academic libraries within the institution. For me, academic libraries are absolutely central to institutions these days. Academics might not like that, but I came across from the dark side to the bright side. I was an academic up until 18 months ago, so I feel justified in saying this. And I think libraries are absolutely pivotal to the university and the changes that are taking place in higher education. And that's why I think in terms of staff wellbeing, the innovation that can be created through the change in the shape of academic libraries, the change in approaches to support changing pedagogies are fundamental. And so there are massive opportunities to innovate. Sorry, I thought I'd taken that out. So there's areas where innovation can take place, and we're seeing across the sector learning commons buildings, lots of examples of learning commons that have emerged as these pedagogies have changed. Increased converged service models, so much greater emphasis on service and needs-led services through convergence or even super convergence of services, providing opportunities again for networking, for different relationships across the university. Changes in research data management services, a massive thing, digital scholarship engagement, which I've mentioned. And as I say, academic libraries are increasingly being rebranded as partners rather than services within the institution. And play a crucial role in driving institutional change. So in actually addressing some of the uncertainties and challenges that are presented within the sector. So academic libraries navigate and manage change in response to internal and external drivers. Again, best examples I think are around digital environment and how academic librarians and academic libraries have engaged with that agenda. Strategic working at institutional level, and particularly based on systems thinking and a forward outlook. So the experience of individuals within academic libraries is being translated into business service models. Widespread adoption and driving of national and global scale shared services, outsourcing, automation, digital for innovation and efficiency. Academic libraries have been doing this for a long time. They're absolutely perfectly placed to be saying to the rest of the institution, look what we've achieved through this adoption of global scale shared services. Culture, values and practice for supporting and promoting excellence. Customer service excellence, for example, there's a kite mark around that. And not least, academic libraries are well placed to support student success and excellence. That is very difficult to measure, and there is no measurement on the NSS about the academic library and the impact. But there are various research studies that, whilst not establishing cause between engagement with the library and attainment, retention and progression, there are strong inferences. So, and a lot of universities, although the blunt metrics of TEF, for example, don't include library usage data, they are often cited within narratives, the institutional narrative that supports the blunt metrics. So I want to conclude by saying that for me, staff wellbeing is really important. We are in times of change, which can impact on our ability to feel safe and comfortable and valued within our job. But this crossroads that we're at, I hope what I've said has sort of made you think that yes, there are opportunities. There are opportunities for us to engage with this and not to be reactive to the agenda, but to be proactive within that agenda and to innovate, which will make us feel valued and valuable and self-actualized. And I would finish off by saying that opportunities for innovation provide a sense of value, but it's okay to start with the small waves. I think sometimes when we're looking at change, we want to be there and we're here. When it's actually all right just to do a bit of change, because that will have a big impact. And it's all right to fall off the board sometimes, because you can get back on. I used to work with Phil Race, who talked about learning through failure. And I always thought that was a really very negative way of looking at things. Learning through experimentation is perhaps a better way to look at it. But we do learn through failure, as Confucius say, the problem is not in falling down, it's in not getting back up. And if we try things and they don't quite work, we have learned, and the next innovation will be better. So, yes, I'm going to end by being evangelical, because I think that you have a massive role to play in terms of the future. And all of this will support student well-being as well, but it will support staff well-being in terms of feeling that you are absolutely pivotal to the changes in the higher education sector.
Thank you very much.